joining today's webcast on the discussion of proposed changes to the HELPS tax benefit. My name is Hank Kim, and I'm the Executive Director of NCPERS. Today's program is part of our expanded Center for Online Learning. As we all adjust to the new COVID reality, please bear with us if there should be any technical issues or unplanned background noise during our session. As always, your patience and understanding is appreciated. We encourage audience participation. Please submit your questions by using the Zoom Q&A function. However, to ensure that we can cover all our topics today, we will hold your questions to the last part of the program. Additionally, a PDF of today's presentation is available by emailing Amanda Rock at amanda@ncpers.org. Today's webcast is sponsored by the law and lobbying firm of Williams Jensen. Established in 1970, the Washington, D.C.-based firm is now completing its 5th decade of operations. The firm is well-known and well-respected in legal and government relations circles. For the past 20 years, Williams Jensen and its partner, Tony Rhoda, have worked on behalf of public pension plans. The firm has represented NCPERS for over a decade. Tony also represents individual municipal, county, and statewide public pension plans throughout the country. He focuses on federal legislative and regulatory issues and provides fiduciary counsel and training. Prior to joining Williams Jensen, Tony served as congressional staffer in the U.S. House of Representatives. Additional panelists today are Beth Foley, who was appointed General Counsel of Ohio Police and Fire Fund in 2008. She began her career with the Ohio Attorney General and spent 11 years as trial attorney defending federal litigation brought against the state of Ohio. Beth is currently the president of the National Association of Public Pension Attorneys and board liaison to the Public Safety Affinity Group of NAPA. Ginger Siegler is the executive director of the Oklahoma Police Pension. A certified public accountant, she previously worked for the Oklahoma Firefighters Pension System for 18 years, ending her career there as controller. Ginger joined the Oklahoma Law Enforcement Retirement System in 2007 as their executive director. After 11 years, she joined the Oklahoma Police Pension System in 2008, again as its executive director. So my job today is slightly different than our normal webcast. I'm going to start off with a brief history of the HELPS legislation. And then after that, I'm going to be turning it over to Tony, Beth, and Ginger. In terms of the HELPS background, it was one of the first items I was tasked to do when I came to NCPERS in October of 2008. I was asked to think about how NCPERS could be more involved and could help with the rising cost of retiree health care. As folks who may remember the early 2000s, it was another tremendous growth in terms of annual increases in healthcare premiums and inflation. So, coming to NCPERS, I was certainly well aware of examples of retirees who almost literally would get their monthly retirement pension benefit and sign it over to their health plan to cover their premiums. We even had a board member whose father was a retired firefighter. And so this example particularly impacted older retirees whose pension benefits were not maybe as generous as more recent retirees who had their, they effectively endorsed over their monthly pension benefit over to a health plan to cover their health costs. So to address this, for a span of 6 years, from 1999 through 2005, NCPERS, we hosted a series of what we termed healthcare task force on an annual basis to brainstorm on ideas and ways to assist these retirees with their retiree healthcare costs. And I think it was certainly out of one of these healthcare task force where we came up with the germ of the idea that eventually evolved into HELPS. And what happened and what the discussion was we knew that active employees could use pre-tax dollars to help pay for their portion of their active healthcare premiums. But retirees could not. And this seemed particularly unfair to us, that it seemed particularly unfair and ripe for a legislative fix. That as more and more healthcare costs were being borne by employees and retirees, and that shift, the cost shift from employers was shifted to employees and retirees. That at the same time, when active employees were being transitioning from working to retirement and are on fixed income, is when health premiums would be paid with after-tax dollars instead of pre-tax dollars, such as they were able to do when they were still working. That just did not make sense to us. And again, we felt that this was an area where we could make significant impact and could make significant improvements to the state of public sector retirees. Unfortunately, we had two major obstacles in standing between us and achieving this goal. First was the cost. To cover all public sector retirees, that cost would have been astronomical relative to the lost tax revenue the federal government would have faced. So to overcome that, the thought for HELPS was to begin with what we viewed as a first step, meaning that try HELPS with public safety retirees, so a limited population of public sector retirees, and also limit the exclusion to the first $3,000. So by doing both of them, we felt that we were limiting and capping the costs. The second obstacle was trying to find a legislative vehicle. Our first serious opportunity came with the Pension Protection Act of 2006. And as that legislation started taking shape and gained momentum, we felt that the Pension Protection Act, or also known as PPA, could be the vehicle for HELPS legislation. Which actually explains one of the, I think, issues that we're going to be talking about today, which is why in God's name does the pension plan need to be involved in this exclusion? Namely, that the law requires the payment to health plans come directly from the pension plan. And it was because, and it is because, the vehicle that we used to get HELPS passed was the Pension Protection Act. And there are rules in Congress that say, if you are going to amend a piece of legislation, that amendment has to be germane, meaning needs to be relevant to that base legislation or that vehicle legislation. So effectively, what we needed to do was create a pension hook to what would otherwise really be a retiree healthcare issue or a tax exclusion issue. And as a result, the member of Congress who really carried the water for us on this said, how do we make this into a pension? How do we create a pension hook here? And the solution that we came up with was to have the payment come directly from the plan. And regrettably, since the passage of PPA, I know that provision has caused a lot of headaches for plans, and in many instances, a lot of retirees, eligible retirees, could not take advantage of it. But without that provision, we would not have been able to enact helps at all. So there was a bit of a cost-benefit analysis, and hopefully, with further discussions here today, we can undo that burdensome requirement and have it be a more streamlined and readily available benefit for participants. So with that brief history lesson, Tony, Mary Beth, and Ginger, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you for that. That's really very helpful and sets the stage for what we're going to talk about, which is the helps provision. Where it is in the law is in the Internal Revenue Code. It is section 402L. It is the entire 402L. So if you're so inclined to read it, it will only be about a page and a half, but a page and a half of tax law, and Ginger is a CPA, leads to, I don't know, 50 to 100 substantive and practical questions about how to implement it. And so this provision is not any different than any other provision. It's come with a lot of explanation. So what it would do, essentially, what it does do is after separation of service, based on disability or reaching your normal retirement age, a retired public safety officer makes an election. And that election is to have amounts that would be otherwise distributed to him or her through the retirement plan as the pension benefit to be withheld. Hank used the up to $3,000 per year. That is the correct amount, and paid directly by the plan to the provider of the health insurance or long-term care contract. The requirement of the direct payment is explained by Hank, and it has caused a number of plans throughout the country. And I'm going to read at the end here, before I turn it over to Mary Beth and Ginger, a list of states that we've heard from, and it's probably incomplete, but it's fairly lengthy as it is. An eligible retirement plan under this statute is a governmental plan under 414D, which is the standard definition of governmental plan in the tax code. It includes your 401A qualified DB plan, 457B plans, and 403A and B annuity plans. And public safety officer is as defined in the Omnibus Crime Control Act of 1968. In general, it's firefighters, law enforcement officers, chaplains, rescue squad, and ambulance crew. And the way this works in practice is the taxpayer or the taxpayer's preparer self-documents this $3,000 so that there is a line on the 1040 that would show your gross retirement distribution. And then there's a line right next to it that showed that you will state what is the taxable amount of the gross distribution. And per IRS instructions, you are to make that calculation. For ease of this discussion, if your gross retirement distribution was $10,000 that year, you would report $7,000 as the taxable amount. So it's less the $3,000 that was used through this helps provision. I will now read to you, before we hear from Mary Beth and Ginger about their experiences, this list of states that we've heard from where there have been plans and there have been problems in implementing the helps provision, most notably created by the problems created by the direct payment requirement. So we've heard from plans in Texas, Ohio, Missouri, Arkansas, Virginia, Maryland, California, Iowa, and Oklahoma. And as I've said, there are probably some that I did not list on here, but that that are out there also suffering. There's another very lengthy list that Hank has provided through a survey of his members of plans that won't even touch this because they do not want to take on the administrative burden of it. So while you have plans out there that are struggling with it and dealing with it, you have a whole slew of plans that are saying, no, this has become, or this is on its face something that we won't do. So now with that, I think it's going to be very valuable to hear from Mary Beth and Ginger about their plans, experiences with this, and maybe we'll start with Mary Beth.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Hank. It's a great explanation of where we are. I'm with you, Hank. This problem really started in 2004 for us, which was the time that Ohio Police and Fire, like you said, had to make drastic changes to what had always been an incredibly affordable group health plan for OP&F retirees, regardless of age, pre-65, post-65. And I did want to start out by Tony. We engaged Williams and Jensen and Tony in 2017 as we anticipated this, and things moved slowly, but there's been amazing progress. So I do want to thank Tony. I wanted to thank Hank, who jumped in with us. We did a presentation about in 2019, I think, and have since signed on sponsors, made a ton of progress in DC. And we would also want to thank the International Association of Firefighters, as well as the National Fraternal Order of Police, who have likewise jumped in with full support to make sure we can secure this benefit for our members, but for all public safety officers nationwide. And what you just gave, Tony, is telling of the number of states who are sort of suffering with this. OP&F is different from the perspective that we were one of the few pension plans that did provide, we're the sole source of retiree healthcare benefits in the state of Ohio. So a model over time where the employer kept their public safety retirees on the city's plan. So we have our 3 Cs, Columbus, Cincinnati, Cleveland, our largest employers. In the early stages, right, they just kept their own members on their health care. When OP&F was sort of rolled up to be the one statewide fund for all public safety officers in the state of Ohio, it also became clear that we probably wanted to become the provider of the health care as well. It removed a burden from the cities, but later became problematic for everybody. So in 2018, our Healthcare Stabilization Fund, which is a separate healthcare trust we maintain under the Internal Revenue Code, so these benefits can be free to public safety officers, was created, but there was great stress on it. And so with our actuary, in the same way he estimates the pension benefits, told us, listen, your healthcare fund is going to be drained in 7 years. Very scary. The board policy requirement for the health of the Healthcare Stabilization Fund was to have 15 years worth of projected premiums and expenses, right? So we were self-insured for healthcare, like a lot of cities are still, and where this issue sort of spreads out among our public safety forces, whether you're a pension fund that provides it, many cities still do and would face the same problem if they move to the Obamacare exchange model, which is, to make a long story short, what we did in contracting with Aon Hewitt to be a third-party administrator of our health reimbursement arrangement, right? And so as Tony knows, and I won't get all lawyerly on you, a health reimbursement arrangement still counts as a health plan under the Internal Revenue Code, but the issue, right, with the health reimbursement arrangement is the 2 items that both Tony and Hank addressed: direct payment to an insurer. Well, that was easy, right? When we were directly paying United Healthcare for one unified group health plan, different for post 65 and an Advantage plan, but one provider covering all of OP&F's retirees, both pre and post 65. Easy, went along like that forever. It occurred to us, although as Tony kind of mentioned at the end there, it is a member's responsibility to fill out their 1040, right? We don't necessarily give our members tax advice. We encourage them to do that with their professional tax help. And because we don't want to make a uniform statement for 52,000 people that we don't know. So I think that for the time being, you know, I can't tell you one way or another if they continue taking the exemption. I think there were very good arguments as a gray area in the law. That part I am being lawyerly. That was legitimate. And we obtained several tax opinions though, in an effort to assist our membership. And that's really where we went to Tony and Hank as well to say, this problem is specific for us, but really general for any public safety officer who needs to take advantage of this $3,000 exclusion. It's obviously very helpful. We of course believe that our membership, unlike the general public, suffers greater injury, particularly in their later years. So the orthopedic issues that face our members in knee replacement and shoulder replacement and lumbar spine, et cetera, we have the numbers to demonstrate, right? They leave this job. If they're blessed enough to make it to the deadline and become a retiree, they still face a lot of these after effects of the kind of work they did well into their retirement. And so I have always felt it's legitimate for them to have this additional $3,000 because they have a lot of additional expenses. And I know Hank probably has numbers. I certainly have numbers on that. We know that 68% of those of our employees who receive a disability from OP&F is based on orthopedic injuries, et cetera. So the desire was to create clarity for them. We don't have that clarity yet, but we're working on it, to say the fact that, you know, from my estimation, we are directly paying Aon Hewitt to fund our stipend model. So when we hired Aon, what they do for us is administer the HRA. We provide $1,040 a month for pre-65 retirees with a family, $600 for individuals. And we provide $250 a month for all post-Medicare eligibility retirees to buy their Med Sup or Med Advantage plans. The difference is that they get to do that in an Aon exchange, where Aon has health partners and almost all are represented, you know, the Anthem, Blue Cross, Blue Shield. The Medicare exchange environment is incredibly stable and has been, right? So our struggle was for our pre-65 retirees. And obviously, if you know, our retirement age is now 52, 25 years of service, 52. Many of them go into drop, but, you know, frankly, it's almost impossible for them to get to age 65 as a police officer or firefighter who's actually on the front line. And certainly the police officers are on call to do regular police duty at any time and are often called to do that. So they're still putting on a uniform and going out, even some of them who are detectives, et cetera, who we think of as desk jobs. So the dilemma, right, is very much for our pre-65. We are in the third year of a 3-year pilot on this health reimbursement experience. And we attempted to make these stipends, they're modeled on the supplement we provided in the group plan. But, you know, I don't know, you may have heard it all around the world. They weren't happy, right? This has been a very difficult process for them. And, they've been troopers. We certainly, we can tell you that it worked in preserving a level of support for healthcare benefits for Ohio's retirees. Our actuary just estimated our healthcare stabilization fund to be at 18 and a half years, even after this difficult year with the pandemic. That means that we can buy a solution because, of course, we're not doing that today, but we're also pursuing Medicare at 55 public safety. That conversation, Medicare for all, Medicare at 55, Medicare at 55 for public safety. We're for all of it. We're for any of it. We're for relief from the exorbitant healthcare costs. So these things seem to go together, but until there is a solution, especially our pre-65s really need that $3,000 to assist them even in this exchange environment, because what our study has shown us so far, they're using the whole stipend just for premiums. So you still have the very difficult out-of-pocket prescription drug issues, and they really need that $3,000 to help with. So that was sort of our perspective from OP&F. We were happy to get sponsors. Those were all great developments. We certainly have Ohio's both senators, Portman and Brown, who have also been willing to assist us. We've directed letters to the Treasury with Tony's assistance. And so we're just going to keep fighting because public safety officers need clarity and they need assistance.
Hey, Beth, thank you for that. That is very helpful perspective. And unfortunately, something that is as easy as this, when you look at it in an objective way, should be done quickly in Congress, but Congress doesn't move quickly on anything. And so your plans, willingness to really stick with it has been terrific. And Ginger, with Oklahoma Police Retirement System, has been extremely helpful as well in educating the Oklahoma delegation on this. But let's turn it over to Ginger for her perspective and her plans experience.
Thank you, Tony. I just want to give you a little history of where I've come from. I've worked with all public safeties in Oklahoma. I've been at fire, the law enforcement, and now the police. And I didn't intend to get involved in this situation, but when I came over to police, I'd worked with law enforcement before, and we were a state agency who took care of state employed law enforcement. So we had one employer, we had one insurance company. We sent our check to the insurance company, it got processed correctly and no issues. I come to police and the first thing I hear is, we're having all these terrible incidents where we send our payment to the insurance companies and they're not processing them correctly. And so we have retirees who are getting notices that their insurance is being terminated. And I'm like, what? I understand. So I started doing some research, and I will give you some facts. We have 3,912 people who receive benefits from us. And we're a small plan. We're 2.7 billion. We have just under 10,000 members in my system, and we pay 3,912 people benefits. That is as of June 30th. But of those 3,912 people, 1,056 of those have insurance premiums withheld from their checks. And of that, that's 2,053 insurance deductions each month. We pay 46 insurance companies a total of $565,000 a month in premiums. The city of Tulsa has 80 different insurance companies that we make payments to. So making sure that we do this correctly has not been a problem. We have the IT to do this correctly, not an issue at all. The problem lies is when we send that check and the sheet of paper that has each person on it, getting those processed correctly. And they want us to send an individual payment for each deduction, which is just not feasible when you have that many to make. So we send an itemized list, and the problem lies is when it's received by the insurance company, sometimes those people are in a hurry and they throw the list away, they deposit the check, and the premiums never get paid and processed correctly. So we have had issues with Aflac, Blue Cross Blue Shields, John Hancock, Mutual of Omaha, and United Healthcare. Well, every time this happens, we automatically contact the insurance company and say, we've made this payment. We're not the member, and because of HIPAA laws, they don't want to talk to us. And so then we have to try to communicate with the retiree, and the retiree gets frustrated with us. We've had 2 people who've had their insurance completely terminated because of this issue. And as you know, for public safety employees, if they don't pay into Medicare or pay into Social Security as an employee, their Social Security benefits that they get are already reduced. So that's one issue. And then you also have the cost of the insurance premiums. Last year I did an analysis, and for just the member alone, just for his insurance premiums, he pays 18% of his pension benefit towards insurance premiums. If he's married, he pays 29% of his benefits towards his insurance premiums. If he has a child or a beneficiary along with him and his wife, he pays 43% of his pension benefit towards insurance premiums. So this $3,000 that they get is so important to them. So my first year at NCPERS, to the legislative conference, I went and I spoke to our one lone Democrat, Kendra Horn. And I will tell you, I'm not trying to belittle any of the other ones, but she was the only representative from the state of Oklahoma who actually sat down with me in her office and talked about this issue. And I'm so pleased to say that she has championed this for us, and she has been so receptive to making sure that she takes this issue and runs with it. And I just feel so passionate. My membership, my retirees, once they retire, they feel like they get neglected. And I'm so passionate about making sure my retirees feel that they are important. So if I can work at this issue to make sure they get this $3,000 and we can alleviate the go-between, it says direct payments. How can a pension system making premium payments for the retirees be considered direct payment? So if there's any way that we can do this and make it easier for our retirees, I'm 100% on board. So if the rest of you have issues, please, let's work together and get this situation taken care of.
Thank you, Ginger. Yeah, that's so critical, is to have the constituent with the problem sit in front of the member of Congress and explain it. And sometimes you have to do it with senior staff, but it really is, if it comes through a filter, it's not as impactful, it's not as powerful.
I was going to say there, Tony. Oh,
go ahead, Mary Beth.
I was going to say, we're also grateful our board of trustees has absolutely been supportive. And as Tony will arrange these meetings, as he says, nothing substitutes for, the chair of our board, the chair of our legislative committee, to go as a firefighter working right in Ohio at that moment as the chair of this board and tell their stories. It is so much more effective. And, if our board has been so supportive and generous, our executive director as well, to saying, yes, you have to make these efforts. And I think you're right. I think we saw a lot more progress once we started taking them with us to those meetings.
Absolutely. And a lot of good work was done during Hank's conference at the beginning of the year, this year, and previous years. But I think this year we had some very substantive meetings that were very helpful, that were arranged with Hank's legislative day. So I just want to take a few minutes and just fill in a couple gaps and give you a status as to where we are. So Mary Beth did mention there were letters to Treasury and there were communications with the IRS around 2017, 2018. And we were told fairly clearly, although never in writing, that the Treasury and the IRS, the regulators, had no ability to change this situation. That the statutory language in this case was pretty clear. And that the payment had to be done in that direct manner. So we switched quickly to the legislative front. And I will say I'm so glad that Ginger and Mary Beth are on this webinar today, because the only actually House legislation introduced on this bill is from an Ohio member, Steve Shabbat of Cincinnati, and a Republican, and he is paired with the Democrat from Oklahoma, Kendra Horn. They've introduced this bill. They've pushed it. They continue to push it. In fact, I had an email this morning from Congresswoman Horn's staff. So everyone's very, very involved on this. And that bill number, for those of you who want to take a look at it, is HR 6436. It's not going to look like much of a bill, because all it does is restate that section of the law without the direct payment requirement. So, but that is the purpose of the bill. So since it's been introduced, we've had very good discussions with the House Committee on Ways and Means. They have jurisdiction over both tax and healthcare. We have done well, I'd say, with the retirement staff. They don't seem to see that this has any problems. This would create a change that we're advocating would create any problems. We are now in the process of educating the healthcare staff, which I hope doesn't take too long, but it's going to take some period of time for them to get comfortable with it. And it's interesting, you know, despite the fact that this has been a federal law since 2006, the healthcare staff of the Ways and Means Committee, you know, is largely unfamiliar with it. And it's no fault of theirs, you know, thousands of pages of federal law. But so it is going to take a little time. We've provided them with examples, Oklahoma and Ohio, obviously, and then from plans around the country that Hank was able to get through a survey of the members. We have two great lists from NCPERS. We have the survey of the plans that don't want to do this because it's too complicated, too burdensome. And then we have a list of plans that are doing it and have problems. So both of those lists have made their way to the Ways and Means Committee. You know, and our target here in the short term, if you recall back at the end of 2019, there was the enactment of the Secure Act, the Setting Every Community Up for Retirement Act. And the Secure Act changed retirement policy in a number of different ways. The Ways and Means Committee today is working on the Secure Act 2.0, which could be introduced before the election. If it is, I don't think it's going to have this provision in it because the healthcare staff is still coming up to speed. But the Secure Act 2.0 is something that's going to be enacted most likely in 2021. So we have time to get our ducks in a row. Ginger's comments about, you know, if you have a plan out there and you're suffering from these types of issues, or you're going to make a change to your plan like Mary Beth described, you know, please let Hank know, let us know, and we can certainly be more successful to have more folks on the field. I'll just say one more thing. There is a second legislative initiative underway, which was really started by the International Association of Firefighters, and that is to double the $3,000 exclusion. All right, so take it up to $6,000. That legislation's been introduced. It is HR 4897. It is separate from the direct payment bill. At some point, they could be brought together in a larger bill, but I wanted the members to know that that initiative is also out there. And, you know, just given the cost of healthcare and what we've seen the cost of healthcare do since 2006, it seems more than reasonable that $3,000 exclusion is increased. Of course, that brings a cost with it, but it's a cost that, you know, Congress is already in this and has said, you know, this policy that Hank outlined early on for retirees is a good thing. So with that, I don't have any more topics to cover. And if anyone would like to add anything, you know, please do at this point, or we could move to questions.
Tony, I think the only thing I would ask you, it's not really a formal question yet, and let me just pause and say, for those who are attending this session, if you have any questions, again, please use the Zoom Q&A function to ask questions of our distinguished panel. But so, Tony, the question I have is, in our COVID shutdown, how has lobbying changed at the federal level? And, trying to make maybe lemonade out of lemons, are members of Congress and their staff, are they changing or adjusting to the more video format? And if so, is that an opportunity for public safety retirees to make direct communications and express their concerns and frustrations and solutions relative to helps in Section 4.2L?
That's a great question, Hank. Yeah, Congress is adapting to this new world, which is temporary. We all hope we're going to see the end of it soon. They've taken a lot of their work into the virtual. There are very few in-person meetings. So I would say 95% of the work that's being done from the lobbying perspective to members of Congress and staff is being done over the phone, by email, some Zoom. I would say that the members themselves, separate from their legislative activities, also run campaign committees to be reelected. And those campaign committees have been very aggressive on the Zoom front. So there are fundraisers by Zoom. So there are definitely opportunities to see and to discuss these issues with members and staff. I'd say largely email and phone for substantive legislative issues. And I've been thinking about this for, if we're still in this situation, and Hank, we haven't discussed this yet, but how do you do the legislative day for January? And, is it possible, and I think it would be, to set up Zoom calls where, Ginger and Mary Beth can be on with most likely a mix of staff and members of Congress from their delegation, and try to replicate that as many times as you could, because you do want to keep in front of these folks. And I think there are ways to do that.
Yeah, and in fact, Tony, as you were talking, one of my follow-up thoughts was, to what degree could either NCPERS or, as Mary Beth and Ginger mentioned, the IAFF or FOP, how could we facilitate either plans or individuals, video conferencing with with their delegation or with their member? I would imagine, members would want to have, contact with their constituents, and given the lockdown, they may be frustrated. So if we could provide them a venue, do you think they would be interested in having conversations specifically on helps?
I do. I absolutely do. And I think it's something that we should look at doing. Of course, we should plan the next month or two for January, February, because now that we're in this pre-election.
You don't think they want to meet us the next 2 weeks?
They might. Are they bored enough to do that? No.
They're not meeting.
They're not, but of course the members are scattered about running for re-election. So I'd say, unfortunately, I think we still are going to be in this virtual world in January and February, and that would be the best time to do it. Okay. If there's a possibility that the Secure Act 2.0 comes together right after the election, then I think we could get busy and do some Zoom calls then as well, to focus just on that and that bill.
Tony, we have a question, so I open it up to the entire panel. What is the possibility of this provision extending to widows/survivors of public safety retirees who pass away? This is the most common question I get from Phoenix, Arizona, IFF Local 439 retirees.
Ginger, Mary Beth, do you want to?
That is a great question. I had not thought of it because one thing we were able to secure in Ohio at our state level is when we made this healthcare change, for the reason your questioner just asked, we have a separate Ohio Peace Officers Death Benefit Fund. And that fund is separate, but still administered by the Police and Fire Trustee Board. So they were on our healthcare. We actually moved our survivors and orphans to the state of Ohio's centralized Department of Administrative Service plan, because as the questioner would note, they can be in a very dire straits. We had 2 officers killed in the line with children under 5 years old. So we were able to do that, but I think that's a very important question for the wider group. What can be done for survivors? Great question.
I think it definitely needs to be addressed. We don't currently have it. Under advice of tax counsel, we can't grant it at the time, but I think that's something we definitely should look at because of the situation Mary Beth just talked about.
Yeah, I do agree. And I think there would be, as it is now, it's retired officer, spouse, and dependents. But, this is very meritorious group of people that would be brought into this. And I think it's something we could talk about. You look at what's been done in Congress recently and you say, well, cost really doesn't matter. Unfortunately, cost is always thrown at you. So yes, this would carry a cost. Would the societal benefits outweigh the cost? I would think so, but we're going to have to face that one obstacle.
Tony, I would just jump right back in for a second. Our Legislative Service Commission incredibly overestimated the cost. So you also then would be very careful, right, on what they come back as their estimate. It was, let's just say, they estimated that this benefit extended to all survivors and children who were recipients of our death benefit fund. They had 8 million, and we said, hold on, guys, it's per year. It's like 2.2 million in our projection. So we sort of had the battle of the actuary. Those numbers just came into, and it was 1.8 million. So, spend the time challenging that. So they just had the State Office of Budget and Management, who quite frankly didn't want to do it. Send back this estimate that terrified the legislators. And, so again, our board and ED supported doing our own actuarial study and demonstrating that it's not as expensive as they think to include survivors.
That's very valuable information. And the Joint Committee on Tax that does the revenue estimates, they're always eager to get information like that.
I have another question. Can a requirement be added to assure that the insurance companies appropriately apply payments coming from the pension fund, as in the Oklahoma situation?
I'm for it. You could try. You could certainly try. I'd have to look at it and see how it would be structured and worded. We certainly don't want to incur the opposition of the insurance community as we try to fix this problem. And I think that's part of what's driving the healthcare staff to look so closely at it and to see. They've told us they want to go directly and ask the insurers, what's going on here? Because we're hearing about these stories with, delays and mixed payments and amounts that are not correct, and that, you're not going to talk to the plan. So we just have to make sure that whatever we look at, it doesn't earn us any opposition.
And just to throw on to there, Tony, our argument is, look, we're paying Aon to do that. And as Ginger mentioned, we'll give you the list, right? I guess it's also, what will you accept? Okay, do you have to have the check? I mean, you trusted us to do the deduction of direct payment when it was a group plan. So why are we making such a difference in the way Ginger's doing it or the way I'm doing it?
Right.
I can demonstrate for the IRS or an auditor, right, that this money went for insurance. So perhaps it's also, you know, how you report it.
Tony, I don't see any other questions. You know, maybe we should end with, you know, what's the best way folks on this, you know, on this webcast and others who are interested, what's the best way they can help?
Best way to help, I would say, initially get in touch with you, Hank, and let them explain what their situation is. And then we would want to plug them into members of the Ways and Means Committee, members of the leadership, members of the Senate Finance Committee, members of the leadership there, because it's really a finite group of members that really can make a difference. Give tremendous credit for Congressman Chabot and Horn, who are not on the Ways and Means Committee, who have kind of put this issue on the map. But it's still going to take some inside baseball to move it through, I think. So, you know, we look at those members who contact you and then we match them up politically.
And to that point, again, you know, I'm more than happy to take your emails. So you can email me at hank@ncpers.org. And our new office phone number is 202-601-2450, excuse me, 2450. Any other closing thoughts from Ginger or Mary Beth?
Thank you again
great then. Thank you so much.
including us. Thanks for all of the support of NCPERS. It's been very important.
No, thank you, Mary Beth, and thank you, Ginger, for your passion and your interest in this topic. I think, you know, truly, Tony and I agree that without your plan, your members, your board's involvement, you know, we would not be where we are today. And I know we still have a ways to go, but you know, I think we've come a long way because of the efforts of Ginger and of you, Mary Beth. So with that, Tony, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you all who've tuned in. Join us next Tuesday for a discussion of U.S. listed companies from China. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.